Let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, politics. No, kidding. Let's talk about religion, right? So when in the slides that I've discussed before, whenever I mention Christianity, remember we're talking about Catholicism, but that's going to change, particularly in 1517. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther is going to protest something. He's going to protest a Catholic practice known as indulgences. So first of all, you have to understand, what is an indulgence? Don't say chocolate, okay? It's not that. An indulgence is basically kind of like a spiritual get-out-of-jail-free card. What do I mean by that? Let's take, for example, let me get a piece of paper here that I can use. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Let's take, this piece of paper here. This is your soul, all right? And every time you sin, you take let's pretend this is a nail, and my arm is going to be a hammer. Every time you sin, you take that nail and you stick it right through your soul, just to make sure you understand. It's right through it, right? Well, when Catholics sin, they are going to go to confession. And when you get absolved from your sins through reconciliation, through confession, the nail in your soul gets removed. But look what remains. Can you see my eye? Probably not. But nevertheless, you see that there's a hole inside your soul. Yes, I'm using the previous slide's notes. That's okay. So there's going to be a remaining hole in your soul. The question is, how are you going to get that filled? Because after all, you can't, yes, you can go to heaven with a holy soul, but different spelling, right? H-O-L-L-Y, holy soul. This one is W-H-O-L-L-Y, right? So how are you going to fill the hole? Well, you can get that hole filled through an indulgence. An indulgence basically makes your soul back to complete. Here's my notes for, pretend these are the original, my notes for the last slide, right? It makes your soul whole again. So the problem is going to be in the 1500s is that the church is pretty much going to give the impression that, selling indulgences is like, we can sell these. Sorry, you can basically buy your way into heaven by buying up indulgences, right? Because there were so many good works that were done by the saints and done by Jesus himself that you can just buy good works. You could buy nice deeds and indulgences and get your way into heaven, right? Not only that, this is where it's going to get really attractive, is that you could actually buy indulgences back then to get get your dead relatives out of purgatory, right? So in fact, there was a little jingle that people who sold these things made up. It's kind of like when a coin in the coffer rings, another soul in purgatory springs. Now, purgatory, you can only go up. You can't go down, right? So when the soul springs from purgatory, springs up to heaven, right? Well, Martin Luther is looking around there and saying, wait a second, that's not right. We cannot be, what are you doing? You're selling salvation. Martin Luther is doing a whole bunch of things to try to ensure his salvation. Doing things that normal people would be doing. Going to Mass, going to confession, doing good works, right? Well, Martin Luther basically says, you're not, this selling of indulgences, that's not right. So he comes up with 95 arguments in order to refute the practice of selling indulgences. So, Martin Luther really did not want to start this whole Reformation type of movement. He wanted to just bring attention to this idea. Now, we could see that because of the way he does it, the way he makes known his objections. What he does is he goes to a university cathedral, in the university chapel there, in the town of Wittenberg, Germany, and there he posts his objections to the cathedral to the church door on Halloween. Okay, October 31st, 1517. Now, for Catholics, that's a significant date, particularly the next day, because November 1st is All Saints' Day, a holy day of obligation. So when Martin Luther does this, he's basically posting something on a bulletin board, right, for all to see. But he's limiting the number of people that can actually read this because he writes it in Latin. He writes it in Latin so that only the educated and the clergy can actually understand what he wrote. Well, the problem is going to be is that people who knew how to read Latin and could understand it translate it to other people that don't know how to speak Latin or know how to read it, right? So then they're like, oh, these are interesting ideas. And then it's going to go viral, right? How is it going to go viral? Well, people are going to take it, translate it into the vernacular, into the local languages, and get it publicized. And they're going to go to the Gutenberg press and start basically churning out these theses. So, it's a long and complicated story, but basically, as Martin Luther's ideas are starting to get spread, Martin Luther's going to start thinking about his own theology. One major difference that Martin Luther is going to have is the nature of salvation. Catholics believe that to go to heaven, to be saved, to have salvation, you need to do two things. You have to have faith, and you have to have good works, okay? Basically, and when am I talking about good works? We need to do the things that Catholics are supposed to do. Go to Mass, go to confession, and not to mention acts of charity. We're not talking, we're not just talking about, helping little old ladies across the street, although it certainly can't hurt. But nevertheless, so you need to have those two things. Luther says, no. Salvation is by faith alone, all right? So you have faith, and you have the trust in God that He will save you, you're good to go. Okay, now I'm making it very simple. So when Martin Luther starts putting that on, putting out those ideas, that's where he's going to start getting into trouble with the church. And in fact, the church is eventually going to tell him to recant. He refuses, and the church excommunicates Martin Luther. Now, there are other reformers out there. The most notable, particularly for our course, is going to be a man named John Calvin. John Calvin's biggest, there's two huge contributions to the Protestant Reformation that Calvin has. The first thing, the most important of which, is going to be the notion of predestination. He's going to spread the belief that God, before you were even born, in fact, pretty much before the invention of the universe, had already decided, had predestined those who are going to be saved and those that are going to be damned. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? So John Calvin is the one that really starts pushing this message. Martin Luther doesn't even want to touch it, but John Calvin does. A second thing that Calvin is going to be able to do is he's going to be able to establish a framework. Calvin gives a more systematic theology to Protestant churches and also gives a political organizational scheme, plan for Protestantism. So if you wanted to set up your own Protestant church, you need to go to Calvin and you need to listen, read his works, particularly his works on how to organize it. And then you could take it anywhere in the world. So that's those are some of Calvin's contributions. But nevertheless, Protestantism is going to spread, particularly the farther from Rome you are. Basically, as you go north in Europe, the more Protestant you're going to get. When you go south, closer and closer to modern-day Italy and to Rome, you're going to get more Catholic. The prime example today is modern-day Germany. Think about it. Southern Germany, or Bavaria, is a heavily Catholic region. There's a pope, Pope Benedict XVI. He was pope between 2005 and 2013. He is a Bavarian. He came from southern Germany, right? And it's a heavy German area, heavy Catholic area. However, as you go north towards, say, Berlin, you're getting into more and more Protestant areas. Okay, so that's a good example of this phenomenon. As you go north from Rome, you get more Protestant. As you get closer to Rome, you become more Catholic when it comes to the overall population.